Hi, good evening all. Yes, Ponmati Muthu says hi, good evening. And Obihash, good evening. Yes, good evening all. Just waiting for the, okay, so just getting the comments and good evening all. And as you know, we are here to discuss the Prelims 2022 examination. The Prelims exam is just over, so we are here to discuss about the Prelims examination and what are the important lessons that we have to learn in this regard. So what are the important lessons that we can draw from this? I think all of you are ready, and I think people are just coming in. Hiba Hashim, yes, Hiba Hashim. So hi Hiba Hashim. Vidya Lakshmi says good evening Vidya. And Ragi Binu, good evening. Okay. So I think that I'm just waiting for the people to just count to come in. Irfan says good evening Irfan. Yep, the people are coming in. So coming back to the main important topic, that is Prelims 2022, you can just see in the slides itself. A lot of people say that this year's exam, the Prelims examination, how was the examination if I ask? I think the people who are watching it, there can be people who must have written the examination, and some people who will only write the examination in the next year 2023, or some people who might write after so many years, or 2024, 25, 26. So there are different category of people who are watching this. So I think we have to understand why Prelims 2022 examination, how did this exam go, what was the important lesson and learning that we should learn as IAS aspirants. You're all IAS aspirants. So as I said, this session can be watched by people who must have written this examination and who believe that your score is not good. Anyway, you have to write the examination next year also. If you believe that your score is not good, you have to write this examination next year. So some of the other way you have to write this examination. So in this regard, all we have to know in this session, all I'm going to discuss is all about what are the biggest lessons that we have to learn in this. So this is that I'm going to discuss here. What is the Ashwant Lal says good evening. So good evening. Adityan says good evening all. So 2022 prelims examination is now over. What did UPSC teach us? By putting 100 questions from different areas, all we need to know is what did they teach us and what are the trends that we have to keep in mind in the coming years to crack this examination. So a lot of people say that you have to do this, do that. So what did 2022 examination teach us? And we have to discuss how to, on the basis of the question paper, how to tune your studies. On the basis of the 2022 examination, all we have to do is how are you going to tune your preparation. So tuning your preparation is also very, very important. How to tune your preparation. So this is the basic content that we are going to discuss in this session, and with me, and I'll take you through some of the important questions, and you can just take a look at this. We'll go through certain questions, and as my analysis says that out of 100 questions, and Sneha says good evening, Amina says good evening, Adityan good evening, Rashid or good evening to all. So I'm just coming back to here. So my approximation is that out of 100 questions, you can clearly see that out of the 100 questions that they asked, we can see that out of 100 questions, 12 questions around approximately came from ancient and medieval India, 4 questions came from modern India, approximately 10 questions came from Indian polity or constitution, 16 questions came from economy, 17 questions from environment, and 13 questions from science and technology, 11 questions from geography, 13 questions from international relations, and almost 4 questions from general questions, which we can call as 100 questions. So you might see, what is this 100 questions written here? 42 questions written here. On the basis of 100 questions that they asked, on 100 questions, at least 42 questions were from the current affairs paper. That means for this time, 42 questions were directly from the current affairs. So this shows the importance of what? This shows the importance of newspaper reading. And I would say that I have got all the question papers, and I'll show you the question papers and how these came from the news areas. I'll show you the sources from which the questions are taken. So that means, just imagine 40 questions, 42 questions means at least you could have scored 80 plus marks in 2022 examination. That means more than 80 marks on 200. 80 marks on 200 were directly from current affairs. So that is a good learning that we have to get in this regard. And for all the people watching here, and this is a very new channel that we have started, and this channel is called Learn IAS Current Affairs. This is a new current affairs channel by LearnStroke IAS. So we thought we'll have a separate new channel, just launched 2-3 days back. We'll have exclusive current affairs related discussions like this in this channel. So that is why we had an exclusive channel. So my point is, out of 100 questions, 40 questions from current affairs. Don't you think that is a huge thing? What do you think? And one more thing that is very importantly happening here is, a lot of people are confused how to study. How to study and what to study, and how we should take your preparation forward. So I'm going to give you answers to all these questions in this session. We'll discuss all the answers, and one thing that I think this is clear. Now we can move to the next important slide. What was the toughness level of the examination? You need to talk about the toughness level of the examination. Were the questions solvable? Can you solve the question? How much of the questions involved application of logic? And did elimination strategy work in this examination? This is something we have to discuss. So I would call this 2022 examination. A lot of people have been asking about the toughness level. I would say this is a more than a difficult paper for people. It was definitely a difficult paper. And if you ask about the cutoff, a lot of people might have asked about the cutoff on 200 marks. I would suggest that anyway between 85 to 95 is a good score. If you have scored above 80%, if you have scored about 80, if you scored your marks above 80, you can start preparing for the mains examination. So in this, above 80% was a good mark, considered as a good mark here. And the questions were a bit difficult. Definitely questions were a bit difficult. And this time, even solving the optional paper, optional options were also a bit difficult in this. Previously, just they have introduced, UPSC has introduced a new type of optioning system called as, you can just see, only one pair, only two pair, or only two pairs, and all the three pairs. So such options made it even difficult for aspirants to solve this. This even made more difficult for people to solve this. So I think this is an important thing that we have to note here. And when you move on, you will understand one important factor. What is the biggest learning of this paper? What is the biggest learning of this paper is, see, all the questions are either based on what? All the questions are either based on history, geography, economy, environment, and you can say Indian polity, history, geography, economy, environment, Indian polity, science and technology. So these are the important areas. Obviously, you know that these are the 5 important pillars. These are the 5 important pillars of civil services examination syllabus. So history, geography, economy, and environment, polity, science and technology. So these are the important areas that we have to study. But what was the pattern that came for the examination? What was the pattern that came for the examination? History, and that we have to study. The pattern was entirely, I would say, unexpected for some areas. Say, imagine, take an example. We say that Ancient India and medieval India and modern India, you can imagine that 12 plus 14 is, it's almost close to 15 to 16 questions came from history areas. But the normal point is, the biggest learning that we have to understand is, when you learn history, normally everybody tells that history is divided into ancient India, medieval India and modern India. So this is something that all of us know, ancient, medieval and modern. But you know what happened? We always say that prelims examination, modern India is the most important area. We have to study modern India very importantly. And obviously you have some question from Indian culture also. So modern India is the most important area that we have to study. But you know what happened in this time examination? When you look at the analysis, we'll show you ancient India and medieval India, the number of questions they asked in ancient and medieval India, that is close to 12 questions from ancient, medieval and including Indian culture. Don't you think this was something very unpredictable? Because you know what happens? Normally people say that normally civil service aspirants do not study ancient India and medieval India. They simply leave that area and they expect more questions to be asked from modern India. So this expectation is completely broken. They broke this expectation. So that means ancient and medieval India questions came more. So there was this is against the expectation. And one more expectation, the number of questions they asked from modern India is also different. When you study history, normally you expect that when modern India, you expect questions on Gandhi, you expect questions on Nehru, Quit India movement, Jallianwala Bagh, you expect non-cooperation movement, freedom struggle, etc. But this time, the most expected areas of modern India were not even asked. That means the most expected areas of modern India were not even asked, and they placed majority of the questions of ancient India and medieval India. That is an important change that happened here. So that is a trend break. That is a trend break. You expected more modern India questions, no modern India questions, more ancient and medieval. And even in Indian culture, you will not believe, even the Indian culture question was related to current affair question. The Indian culture was more related to current affairs question. They asked this question of Somnathpur temple. They asked this question of Somnathpur temple from current affairs. So that means, just imagine, ancient and medieval India plus they mixed it with current affairs question. So this is a new trend which came here. And let's take the other important example. So let's take the other important example of geography. And don't worry, in this session I'm going to show you all the important question papers like this. We'll have an exact discussion of each and every area and how the questions were being asked. And this question, you can just take a look at the questions. I'll not solve the questions. I'll tell you the analysis of how this question came. And sometimes I'll even show you how this question came from the newspaper. You can exactly see. There is a question on economy called as indirect transfers. Many of the people who did not read the newspaper found this question difficult. But this was an exact question that came in the newspapers. You can just check it. Indirect transfer is now proposed to be buried. So like this, I'll show you many of the questions and how these questions came from the newspaper. I think that is the important discussion that I want to take forward. So before we move on, we have to take a few analysis before we move on. So that is what I was trying to tell you. So history, you can say that there was a big pattern break. And what else? What is the biggest lesson that we have to learn now? For anyway, when we study for prelims examination, the first thing that we have to know is, for every subject, we have to study the basic areas or the conventional areas. And we have to study what is called as the current affairs. For any subject, for history, geography, anything, we have to learn the basic as well as the conventional areas. And in 2022 examination, I would say, who are the people who could have qualified this paper? I would call as senior aspirants who have been preparing for 2-3 years completely with good concept clarity can crack this paper. And freshers, people who are new to this examination, they can also crack this examination if they have full concept clarity and good current affairs review, current affairs coverage. But the biggest problem, what happens here? The biggest problem that happens here is majority of the people did not cover the current affairs properly. I said 42 questions from current affairs. So current affairs coverage was very low. That is why majority of you found this question paper difficult. And the next important lesson that you have to learn here is, you can see this biggest lesson is concept clarity. Majority of the people did not have the concept clarity. The questions that they asked in this examination demanded concept clarity. You need to know the concept completely well. If you knew the concept completely well, definitely you could have answered that question properly. And wide subject study was missing. And the most important learning that you can see here is no unimportant thing. Normally people tell you that this is an important area, you have to study this. This is an important area, you have to study this. But this time's UPSC paper proved that there is nothing called as unimportant. Very importantly, we have to know this. There is nothing called as unimportant area. If there is a syllabus for the UPSC, you have to study everything under the syllabus. Not that you study this area, X is very important, you study, you say that Y is not important. There is nothing called as not important. This prelims examination taught us that majority of the so-called questions which are not important, they were asked in this examination. So there is nothing called as no important question. And don't miss out current affairs and have a good logical thinking. That is the best learning of this examination. Now we'll actually go on to the number of questions that they asked here. Let's take a look at this. Economy questions. So we'll look at some of the economy questions that they asked. So how was economy questions? I would say economy questions were basically from two sources. Majority of the economic questions were basic conventional questions from the books. If you study the basic economics, many of the questions you could have cracked it, but some of the questions are also from current affairs. You can just take a look at this. The rapid financing instrument and rapid credit facility, they asked this question. Obviously, this is something that comes in the news itself. So you could have easily solved this question. And they asked this question regarding near and rear. Nominal effective exchange rate and real effective exchange rate, which is called as near and rear. So what is the learning in this? Near and rear, the learning is, when you see near and rear, such areas are normally not studied, and some people, they do says this is an unimportant area. People believe that this is an unimportant area, not a priority area. Since these are small things that come in your book, this also is asked in the examination. I would call this question as a current affair question. You know why? Recently RBI came out with few articles regarding near and rear. That is the reason why this question was asked. So we can call this question definitely a question from current affairs. So people who read the newspaper must have definitely got this current affair question. So inflation is, next question was regarding inflation. They asked a question on inflation. Economy, very expected question. So that means you get this question. This was purely from the basic. This is a combination of current affairs and combination of your conventional knowledge. See, next important thing is you need to understand, how do you crack a question? How do you solve a question for UPSC? How can UPSC ask a question? There are two important things to understand. How can UPSC ask a question? One, they can ask the question from a basic books. They can ask the question from basic books. Second, they can ask the question from current affairs. They can ask the question from current affairs. And the third scenario is when you can UPSC ask a question by combining a concept from the books and mixing it with current affairs. That means you get a question. Inflation is basically, you have to study inflation in your books, and when you link that inflation with a current affair angle, you mix the current affair and a basic knowledge to create a question. And this is a classic example. The inflation, this is something that you can study from the books, and something when you read newspapers also, you would have come across this question, and with the newspaper reading you could have cracked this question. Very easy question. If you read the newspaper, you could have cracked this question. That is important learning that we have to learn from this. And then there were questions regarding inflation indexed bonds. What do you mean by inflation indexed bonds? This is something that even many times newspaper talks about inflation index bond. This is being a current affair since the last 4 to 5 years. This is appearing in the newspaper, something called as inflation indexed bond. So people who read the news, this can also be a pure cut current affair question. If you read the newspaper, definitely you could have cracked it. But the point is, people do not read newspapers. That is the saddest part in this. And what about the next question? The foreign-owned e-commerce system. The foreign-owned e-commerce firm operating in India. So what is foreign e-commerce system? Just like we say Amazon, companies which are the e-commerce foreign-owned companies. This is also a current affairs question. You know why I said this is a current affairs question? People who read economics, so this was also a current affair question. You know why? Foreign-owned e-commerce system. This question was asked because there was a problem between Amazon and Cloudtail India. This came in the newspaper, the Cloudtail India and Amazon. So a lot of discussion was going on regarding the functioning of companies like Amazon in India. So how should companies like Amazon function in India? This was a simple, you can just get this question if you have read the newspaper. This was a simple question. Simple means, that doesn't mean that I said this is simple for people who read newspapers and difficult for people who do not read newspapers. So what is the biggest learning that you get here? That means biggest learning is we have to learn the basic books. We have to learn the basic books with 100% clarity. Plus you have to follow the current affairs, read the newspapers, and if you need to mix this both. You need to mix the content both. So that have a content clarity 100% from the books and read the current affairs. You can solve any question. So people who did not do this found this paper very, very difficult. So what is the learning for you for in the future? You should read the books as well as read newspapers. So moving on to the next question. Which of the following forms the real sector in the economy? This is a basic book question. I would say if you read your basic books, even the NCERTs and the basic economy, you could have solved this question. And this was again real sector economy. That was a basic book question. So obviously, if you have read the basics, you could have solved this question. Real sector economy. And something called as indirect transfers. Newspaper, they recall something about indirect transfers. Why did this question come? I would call this question as a current affair question. You know why current affair question? Because this was asked in the newspaper. You can see, just take a look at this. Only if you read Hindu, you will understand that the government discussed something about taxation laws amendment. If you read the newspaper, you could have got this. Did you see this? Did you see this? Did you see this concept in the newspaper? Indirect transfers. So this was not a question, they did not ask a question out of space. This asked a very simple question from the newspaper. So again, who will benefit? People who have read the newspapers and people who knows the idea will get this question right. So there was this question on indirect transfer. So that is how it goes. And next question was something regarding the expenditure made by a company. So they ask about capital expenditure, debt financing and capital expenditure. So this was also a bookish question. If you read the books, this was a bookish question, but you should know debt financing, equity financing, these are some of the areas which UPSC aspirants do not study in economics. When you study economics, you study everything, but you do not study about the areas called security, debt, equity, you can call stock and share market, mutual fund, etc. These are areas which people do not like. Do you like this area? How many of you like this area? I can just see some comments coming up. How many of you like this area? Normally people do not like this area. You know why? So this is a new learning that you have to understand. I'm just trying to tell you that point again. If there is a syllabus, you have to study everything under the syllabus. Study everything under the syllabus. If you study economics and mutual fund, equity, debt, securities, etc., shares, debentures, all these things, if they are in the syllabus, they are meant to be studied. You have to study that. So there is no point in escaping from those topics. So next time, people who are studying in the future, if you are definitely studying about economics, and if you have to study the complete syllabus, and don't escape from some topics. So if some people did not, capital expenditure is something that you study. but debt financing, equity financing, all these areas are not liked by UPSC aspirants. So these are from books. You should study the basics properly. If you would have studied the basics, you would have got this question correct. So please try to understand, read from the basics. Again, they ask the same question. Dated securities, savings, borrowings, internal debt. These are also questions from books. But if you do not know the concept, if you do not have the concept clarity, you cannot solve this question. So again, this was also a difficult question. If you do not know the area, it is again a difficult question. See this question. Tight monetary policy of US Federal Reserve. That means even America's policy, just imagine, even America's economic policy, which was there in the newspaper every now and then, even if you read today's newspaper or yesterday's newspaper, you would have seen that how newspapers carry even how the US economy's impact on India is being discussed. So I would call this question, if you want to, and again, external commercial borrowing, ECB, capital flight, everything was actually discussed in the current affairs. If you read the economy, definitely this was also something that you could have, but definitely on the other side, this question was a bit tough. Even if you read the current affairs, that was not an easy question. You should have applied your logic and mind in this. That was not so easy. So I think not so easy, but still you have to work on this question. I would call this question as tough, and for people who do not know this. And again, they asked this question on ICRA. What is ICRA? A lot of people who could not answer this question and they got this wrong system. What is brickwork ratings? What is ICRA? Again, a classic question from current affairs. If you read the newspaper properly, you will come across one factor that ICRA is not something that is new. Let's take a look at this. RBI, when you read the newspaper, this rating agency ICRA, according to brickwork ratings. So you can just see this, according to brickwork ratings. So I think this is the same thing that is asked in the question papers, right? They have asked about brickwork rating, they asked about ICRA, and you can see the same thing in the current affairs articles and newspaper articles. So what does this say? This is a current affair question. If you read the newspaper, you could have got this, but many of you could not get this question because you did not know the newspaper reading. So economic question was something related to this. And again, this was an expected question. Lot of times current affairs discuss this. Banks Board Bureau, which is called as Banks Board Bureau. You can just see the next question. Current affairs article. There were a lot of articles like Bank Board Bureau. You can just see it yourself. The Bank Bureau states uncertain future. This was also a question from newspaper. So what am I trying to tell you? I think you're getting this point clear, right? So how do you feel actually when I'm showing you the corresponding links from the newspaper? Are you understanding this thing? Please chat in the comment box. I'm just seeing the Arshita Binu, I'll send you the answer sheet because I'm not discussing the question. I'm not going to discuss the 100 questions here. I'm just trying to give you an idea of how the questions was asked. And when you get from the newspaper, so are you getting the idea that how important newspaper study is all about? Please respond. I hope you know how newspaper reading is important and important. So when you economics questions, I think we have done with the basic economy questions, and yeah, there was a question on convertible bond and a few questions like there was a question like this. How many times have newspapers showed this actually? Non-fungible tokens. What do you mean by non-fungible tokens? They are something called as non-fungible tokens, and you can just see how many articles have come regarding the non-fungible tokens. You can see NFT, the non-fungible tokens, and why are they important? So many articles came for non-fungible tokens. So I think reading newspapers is one more clean. So what is the learning here for economy? Economy, what is the learning here? That is something that we have to discuss in this session. So what is the learning for economy here? I would say that economy questions, you can say that many of the questions, economy questions, many of the questions from books and current affairs, I would say that economic questions, more number of questions were tilted toward current affairs. Even though bookish knowledge is important, many of the questions came from current affairs. So that is my understanding on this. So I think economy this time in 2022, more of the questions came from current affairs. So what is the learning that we have to take here? What is the learning? We have to get the concept clarity well, read the books carefully, and read the newspapers carefully. That is the learning for economics. And when you move on to the next important area is modern India. Modern India, as I told you in the beginning, it's complete shocker because lot of questions from ancient India and medieval India was asked. And how many of you like ancient and medieval India, by the way? And Archita Binu says, now I understand the importance of reading newspaper, because that is how you can say that majority of the questions, if you read newspapers well and if you read content, you can crack civil service examination. And how many of you should tell me how many of you like ancient and medieval India? History, you can see that majority of the questions came from ancient and medieval India. And modern India questions were unexpected. You did not get a question. Look at this Indian history. This question from which of the following are Jain textbooks? Jain textbooks. I think this was a difficult question from ancient India. And then there was Aryadeva, Dignaga, Nathamuni. I would say that this is also a difficult question. This is easy question if you have read the ancient India properly. And I truly know that majority of you do not read ancient India and medieval India. So this was also a difficult question if you do not read it. And you can see next question was next ancient India, medieval India question was regarding the Mongol invasion, medieval India, Alauddin Khilji, Muhammad bin Tughlaq. It's regarding their rule. To crack this question, you need to have concept clarity in ancient and medieval India. You need to have a concept clarity in medieval India. That is something that people don't have. People do not like having conceptual clarity because they do not read it. So this question also needed a clarity for this, and I would say tough question for people who do not know this. Kautilya's Artha Shastra, that was also you could have solved this question if you had a historical reading, or else this question is also tough for general people, because if you do not know the Artha Shastra, because if you do not read ancient India, you will not get an idea. Definitely there in the syllabus, but people don't read it. And again from modern India, they asked this question about factories. When you study modern India, you know English East, they asked this question on English East India Company, but again, this was also a very, very tricky question from modern India. Not an easy question though. It's not an easy question for, this is ANU Vlog said, I like both ancient and medieval India. Very good. If you like ancient and medieval India, read more for the examination. This was not also an easy question. What is Kula Dharan? Such question was also a difficult question. And the rulers. Match the following the rulers. Match the following the rulers of ancient India. Chandela, Paramara, kingdoms and dynasties which nobody studies. Normally people do not study such question. So what is its unimportant thing? People say that this is an unimportant thing, you don't have to study this. That is the main important thing that people tell you. So ancient India contain all these questions. And moving on, they asked this question about world's tallest statue is sitting in the pose of Ramanuja, inaugurated by the Prime Minister of India. So they asked a question on medieval India by linking current affairs. They asked the question by modern India by linking current affairs. They asked a question about Ramanuja and they asked this question. Again, difficult if you do not study ancient and medieval India, you are going to be very difficult. And the Prime Minister recently inaugurated the Somnath Temple Circuit House. On the basis of Somnath Temple, they asked this question. Only one thing, it's also a difficult question if you do not read the newspaper. This question was from the newspaper. If you have read the newspaper, you could have solved this question, especially the options. This was something that you from the newspaper, but nobody read the newspapers, and that is why majority, if you have read the newspaper, you could have solved this. So what is the learning in history? History, there is only one learning that I will tell you. There is nothing called as unimportant. If there is a syllabus apart from modern India, from now onwards for the future examination, you should also study ancient and medieval India to a minimum, bare minimum. You have to study about that, or else getting more than 12 questions is equal to 24 marks. If you do not know this area, you lose 24 marks out of that. So please don't take a risk on that. Read ancient India and medieval India more, and try to read current affairs, find out whatever history questions that they come in. So that was the analysis and learning that you have to do for modern India. And let's take a look at the polity questions or Indian constitution questions. I would say, what is the learning for Indian constitution questions? I would say majority of the questions, you can say 90% of the questions, unlike economy, you can say that majority of the questions came from the books. And many of the questions were solvable. If you read the book, you could have solved almost 90% of the polity questions. This time they did not make polity questions tricky one. So very glad that every question has two parts. One from the basic books and one from the current affairs. So polity was more on this side. 90% of the questions were directly asked from the books itself. They asked a question on the contempt and the parliament, and they asked a question regarding the government law officers. This was a simple question. And they asked a question on constitutional amendment of the constitution. They asked a question on amendment of the constitution, which was very expected question. And they asked a question on attorney general and solicitor general, very much in the book. And the constitution and the ministers, they asked a question on the minister. This was a very commonsensical question. So that means Indian polity, the questions were more very commonsensical question. If you read the basics and applied your common sense, you could have solved 90% of the polity questions. So constitution questions were more easy. So I think the analysis that I would like to give you for polity and constitutional is, as I said, 90% came from basic reading. With basic reading and common sense, 90% of polity questions could have been solved for people who read the subject. And moving on to the geography questions. Geography question was also a big time shocker. Big time pattern break. Geography question was also a trend breaker. You know why trend breaker? When you study geography, you normally expect that they will ask a lot of question on earth. They will ask a lot of question on climate, atmosphere, pressure, water, cyclones, anti-cyclones. They will ask about La Nina, El Nino, and the climatic system, Indian monsoon, the formation of rain. These are some of the expectations that normally students have when you study geography, that you will get questions like this. But this time, as I said, there is nothing called as unimportant thing. Majority of the questions from the geography deviated from the usual type of questions. And since all of you study only about climate, principles of geography, earth, cyclones, and important geophysical phenomena, this time the geography questions were a bit different. You can see they asked about questions from cropping pattern. They asked questions from crop system. Which are the important crop system? System of rice intensification. This question was from the current affairs. Many articles came up with rice intensification articles, and this was from the current affair. And just imagine world geography question. Which one of the following lakes is west of Africa has become dry? Again from current affairs. Current affairs question. And again this question was asked, and this was also the Gandhi Kota Canyon of South India was created by which of the following rivers? Pure question from current affairs. You know why? I can show you this question. Andhra Pradesh government plans to renew to get UNESCO's tag for Gandhi Kota. So definitely this question was from the answer was Pennar, and this was actually revolving in the current affairs newspaper. So this was also a current affair question. So beyond the expectation, normally people expected. And this time borders, countries and borders. Geography was all about countries and borders. Which of the following countries borders Afghanistan? Which of the following countries border Afghanistan? Afghanistan is in the current affairs, right? Obviously Afghanistan is in the current affairs. Afghanistan is definitely in the current affairs. So if you know the Afghanistan, you need to know the borders also. So geography question on the basis of borders was asked here. And wetland, you can call this as an environmental question or a geography question. Majority of the wetland match the following were even asked. That means you need to know what is a wetland system. This is a basic book question. Very book question. If you have read the And definitely you know that Shastangota Lake, people from Kerala, you know that Shastangota Lake is not in Tamil Nadu. So obviously fourth statement is wrong. So such question, match the following countries. So what is the learning in geography? The learning in geography is that apart from learning principles of geography, you also have to read about countries, borders, world geography, etc. So that was also an important learning. So read more on geography. So that was the geography learning. And science and technology. And science and technology. How many of you like science and technology? Majority of this, and you can say that majority of the science and technology, there was a question on SaaS, software as a service, short range devices, biofilm, probiotics, COVID vaccines, solar flares, Web3, nanoparticles, DNA barcodes, open source platform, and PET. I would say that the science and technology, out of this close to almost 16 or 12 questions, you can see that 85% of the questions are directly from the newspapers. 85% of the questions are directly from the newspapers. And I can show you, science and technology is something they asked more of technology questions, and look at this question. They asked a question called fractional orbital bombardment system, which they talk in the newspaper. Fractional optical bombardment system. When you hear, oh wow, it's a very difficult question. How do you solve this question? Just look at the newspaper. China has recently tested this concept of fractional orbital bombardment system. So this is the same thing, right? This is the same thing that you see in the newspaper, right? So this, that is the reason why for science and technology, almost 85% of the questions were directly from current affairs. Look at this question. They asked this question on DNA barcoding. They asked a question on DNA barcoding. I don't know how many of you have heard about DNA barcoding. If you have not heard about, then look at this current affairs question. A human DNA inspired storage system is in the works. Each capsule is labeled with single stranded DNA barcode. Again, this was asked in Science and Tech. Science and Tech in Hindu newspaper. They asked this question as DNA barcode. So again, that is also a simple question that if you have read the newspapers. And what about the next important question? Probiotics. If you have heard about curd, have you heard about probiotics? That is not a current affair question. Probiotics is in the news. Everybody is talking about probiotics. Why is probiotic beneficial for people? You can see this question. What are probiotics and why should? And even in February 19, they came up with an article. Multivitamins, omega-3 probiotics may cut risk of COVID-19 study. In the wake of COVID-19, everybody wanted to do the diet. So according to this, probiotics. So what is probiotics? If you do not know, health freaks might know this answer. What are the benefits of probiotics? That is also a current affair question. And what is this? They asked a question on Web 3.0. There is Web 1.0, 2.0, and now something called as Web 3.0. What is this Web 3.0? This was also in the news many times. Newspaper discussed this articles called as Web 3, a vision for the future. That is, it is called as Web 3.0, you can see in the newspaper. And India is poised for major leap in the gaming industry in Web 3 for Web 3. This is also a newspaper article. So again, a question from current affair. Web 3 was in the news. So what is the learning for science and technology? Science and technology, that means you have two important aspects, basic and current affairs related. So this time more of the questions came from current affairs from the newspaper. But next time when you study, make sure that you also study the basic as well as the conventional current affairs part. So that was regarding the learning of the science and technology. And let's take a look at the environmental experience. Environmental experience, they asked a question on climate action tracker, climate group, what is wetland, WHO air quality, Gucci mushroom, nitrogen fixing plants, biorock technology, Miyawaki method, acid rain, solar projects, wildlife protection, species and birds. In my opinion, I would say that my reading of environmental paper, I would say out of the 100%, I would say 70% of the questions of environment came from current affairs and the 30% definitely came from the basic books. So again, dominance for current affairs. Let's see some of the questions that they asked. And the Miyawaki method, they asked a question on Miyawaki method. It's there in the newspaper for a long year, last 3 to 4 years. They have been talking about the Miyawaki method, cultivating forest projects. So this is the same question that they asked, Miyawaki method. They asked the same question. So what is the learning for environment? I would say almost 70% of the questions they asked from current affairs itself. That was very evident from this. And you can see majority of the questions, Biorock technology, WHO, air quality index, everything was in the news itself. And that was environment, and that was environmental learning. And international relations was very, very important this time. They asked a question on G20 framework, Turkish states, Senkaku Islands, places in news, regions, Vietnam, UN credential system, polar codes, United Nations General Assembly. I think in my opinion this time, the current affairs question, almost 60 to 70% of the international relations questions came from current affairs. You know why I would say this? Why current affairs is important? Because international relations questions, I would say, was a bit tougher for people who did not need newspaper. But definitely people who read the newspaper, it was easy. For people who did not read this, was tougher. And one more thing is important. While you read international relations, look at the question. The country, Guinea, Lebanon, Tunisia, Chad. And why is this country important in the newspaper? So such areas, what is the learning when you get such question? Next time when you read newspaper, all you have to do is, next time when you read the newspaper, look at the countries that come in the newspaper and you should observe what is happening in that country. This is a clear question of that, match the following, right? Setting up of, you can just see in this, setting up of constitutional, suspension of constitution. So the country and match the following is important. So that was important. And also places in the, this was regarding the country. If you read the newspaper, Chad was, Guinea, every country was in the newspaper. And look at this, the places in the newspaper, Anatolia, Amhara, Cape Delgado, Catalonia, which of the following places are correctly matched? So when you read newspaper, you will definitely come across these words. So that was all regarding international relations. And so what is the learning? International relations was a bit tough for people who did not learn it. But apart from learning the important concepts, you should also learn about countries, what is happening in the countries and what is happening in the places in the country. So that was all about international relations. I would say it was a bit difficult. And certain questions are directly asked from Press Information Bureau, PIB, the government portal of, you see this question, the Coal Controllers Organization. What is the role of Coal Controller Organization? Many of you did not answer this question. I would say 85% of the people did not answer this question. It was a simple question, rightly picked from the newspaper. Just see this. Just see this question. Coal Controller Organization. The Coal Controller Organization. You can just see the article and the news item given in the PIB. Same question that they asked in the examination. So what does that show? This shows that whatever you read, does this show some confidence actually? Please, please comment actually. You can just see this question. That means newspaper and PIB, Press Information Bureau, is also important. So what is Press Information Bureau? You can simply log on to Google and find out Press Information Bureau. That is also very important in this. So this was one such question that directly came from the Press Information Bureau. And moving on to some of the next important questions is greenwashing. They asked a question on greenwashing, which has been in the news for the last 2 to 3 years. The concept of greenwashing comes in the newspaper. So again, there was a question on what is greenwashing. Again in the newspaper, greenwashing. And then there is a question of India Sanitation Coalition. They asked a question on India Sanitation Coalition. Look at the article. Newspaper, Hindu newspaper. Look at the Hindu newspaper. You will really find out that Karnataka government gets award for this effective communication. That is Indian Sanitation Coalition, or the ISC, that was formed. So there are articles, 100% question from current affairs. India Sanitation Coalition, they also asked from this. And there was another question on Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. On Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, you can see the pre-IB report in the current affairs which says that Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission with a budget of this. For the last 1 year, at least lot of articles are coming in the current affairs and newspapers regarding Ayushman Bharat Digital. So now, I was trying to give you some of the important analysis. I did not discuss the 100 questions. At least we discussed almost 60 to 70% of the question paper. What is the learning that you got from this paper? For each subject, I told you that there is one important thing that you have to note. For every subject, whether it is history, geography, economy, polity, science and technology, environment, each question has two important areas. One is the subject or the basic book. This is the basic book, the subject book, and the current affairs that is happening in the newspapers. This is the study for next year. Study from the books, everything that is in the book, study it completely. Read newspapers and current affairs thoroughly. Do not miss it. Either they can ask a question from this, directly from the book, either they can ask a question directly from the current affair, or they can combine a question. Take an area from the book, take a current affair from the newspaper and combine it to create a current affair mixed question. So, my analysis is that please read the syllabus. Biggest learning for 2022 prelims, what UPSC taught us that syllabus is the most important thing. Nothing is unimportant. Nothing is unimportant. And do not miss current affairs, especially newspaper. And it's a humble request to all of you. I know many of you read the current affairs magazines, different websites. You read it, but do not substitute newspaper. If you read newspaper, you will get daily you will get at least, I would say, at least 15 to 20 important areas from different topics to study. Please, under 15 to 20 topics from the newspaper from different areas to study. That is why newspaper is important. So the biggest learning that UPSC 2023 taught us for next years that you're writing, if you're writing for this examination, learn everything under the syllabus. Don't say that I did not study map, I did not study countries and the border, I was not interested. I did not study ancient India, medieval India because that is not important. And I did not study agriculture areas. I only studied the popular area. So study everything under the syllabus. Nothing is unimportant. Do not substitute newspaper. Please make it a habit. You start doing this. You can crack the civil service examination out of, doing but two things is important thing that you have to do. All you can do is two important things that you can always do. One is learning and the second is solving. If you have two skills, this is the first skill, this is the second skill. So learning is you know everything, you learned 100% perfectly. But if you do not know the concept of solving the paper, solving the question paper, you have failed. If you know the concept of solving and you do not have the learning, you fail. For the 2023 paper and for all the people who are going to write the examination in the future, as I said, nothing is unimportant. Learn everything from the syllabus and definitely read newspapers and please do comment here. And newspaper, obviously majority, Hindu is a very good newspaper, Hindu Press Information Bureau of the government, and you can even read Indian Express. Whichever things you read is actually important. And did you please comment below? Did you see did you get a confidence actually? Some of you might have got confidence, and some of you might have been feeling dejection because you did not get this question. So no issue of dejections. Please do this thing. That is the reason why I showed you the newspaper sources. Just to give you an idea that more than 42 questions, that means 80 plus marks would have been from the newspaper, and everybody is talking about cutoff. 85 to 95 is a good cutoff. So just imagine, only from the current affairs you could have scored 80 plus marks if you read newspapers well. So that is my humble suggestion for 2023, and for all the other people, read everything under the syllabus. And please, book note effect. Do not believe that whatever you studied in the book will be asked, and practice more. That is the only thing that grand learning that I have to tell you for this. So please do, I think you can comment below, and something that you did, I think you really got a confidence that newspapers definitely carry those questions. So if I read newspapers in the next attempts, read it more with concept clarity, you will definitely be able to crack the examination. And concept clarity is the most important thing. Are you agreeing to me? Please do comment on the chat box. I can just see the comments also. And the concept clarity, please do not miss it. Concept clarity is important. If I ask you about, say, imagine if I ask you about the President of India election. Now current affairs, everybody is talking about presidential election. The new president is going to come. If I ask you about presidential election, you know that this is the content that you have to study. 0 to 100. This is the content that you have to study. Just by studying 50% of the content of presidential election, do not believe that I've studied the entire topic. Whenever you get a topic, know 100% of that topic, so that is concept clarity. Just because you know 50% of the content, you go for the examination that I know everything. No, get the concept clarity, because if you get the concept clarity, it's a good mix of 20. If you get a good concept clarity, this is concept clarity, and you read the newspaper well and get the current affairs, what is the exam? What is the result? Good concept clarity, CC plus CA. That means you crack prelims. That is the formula that you have to remember. You have the concept clarity well, good current affairs analysis, CC plus CA. That means you crack the prelims. So please remember this 100%. Whatever subject you study, 100%. So that is all, and that was all about the biggest lesson that you taught. So I think you will keep up all this mind, keep everything in this mind, and I hope you are confident enough in the future sessions, in the coming years, you'll be able to crack the examination properly. And that is why this is the official channel of LearnStroke, Learn IAS Current Affairs. That is why we created this new channel, just launched 2-3 days back. And you will have a lot of, we are conducting a new series, you can just see this. Something called Explain Wala for IAS, which carries a lot of current affair videos, and you can see a new section for 2023 prelims. We are starting a free current affairs prelims test series. Every day almost you can say 5 questions from the newspapers, that just like you saw the questions like UPSC asked, you can see Crack Prelims 2023. It's a series that we'll run until next year. You'll get 5 questions from the newspaper. So watch those videos to solve the question papers. So you can just check the channel, we are uploading more videos. So you can watch Explain Walas for current affairs, and 2023, Crack Prelims 2023, you'll have 5 questions every day from current affairs. So watch out all this, and for more sessions, please do interact with us. Let us know if you want more sessions, and keep everything in mind. And thank you so much for this wonderful patience and wonderful crowd you have been, and I hope you really like this session, and please come visit our channel more and more. Thank you so much.